everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to talk some more about Jerusalem, specifically the Temple Mount. We're going to talk about an event that's going to be taking place there during Passover. We're going to talk about Ramadan. We're going to talk about the effort and the attempt to start a third Intifada, which would basically result, I think, in war. And I just really feel it. I think a lot of you do too. We're really in that time. There's been a lot of things building up to this point. And if you saw my last video that I put out earlier today, it was talking about, I guess, the real possibility of civil war in Israel. And if not full out civil war, just distraction, in how it'd be a great time for any of the enemies of Israel to attack Israel when they're fighting with each other, when there's political destruction or distraction and strife and whatever, especially if an actual civil war breaks out. That would make it all the easier, I would imagine. Well, that was one thing. That was a video by itself. Now we got to talk about the rest of it. Oh, and by the way, you can see the BYU Jerusalem Center right there. That's really cool. There it is. There's the the Dome of the Rock. I was wanting to put out this video earlier today, but it just didn't work. It's spring break, so we went to go and try and do something today, but our plans were thwarted by a film crew. I don't know if it was for a movie or if it was for a TV show, but we went to, there's this place in northern Oklahoma called the Salt Plains, and they're salt flats, just like in Utah. I didn't even know that those existed over here in the Midwest. But we went all the way there. There was nothing on the website. There weren't any signs. Got all the way to the place. And the part that we were going to, you have to take this dirt road. And at the end of the road, I saw a police car, but I saw everybody parking, And so we parked, got out, started walking over there just to find out that this film crew had a permit to do filming over there, so no one could go to the salt plains. So everyone was pretty upset, and there wasn't any other follow-up thing that we could do. So anyway, it all just kind of I don't know. But so I'm doing this now. I'm doing this video. Okay, really quick. Here's the update on our Book of Mormon sharing challenge. We're at 4,632, which is an increase of 7 from yesterday, which is actually pretty meager. Now, the day is not over yet, so this may go up after I do this video. But please continue to do this challenge. Let me know once you do it. It's very, very easy to do. And likewise, we've only gone up 2 new people that have joined the challenge, so we're at 409. It's easy to do. Send it out to anybody that you can think of that's not a member of the church. Doesn't matter if you know them or not. Make it as personal as possible. But just sending it out is better than doing nothing. So please join the challenge. Let's see how far we can go with this. All right. So first, we're going to talk about this event that's taking place during Passover. Then we're going to talk about Ramadan and Jews ascending the Temple Mount. And then we're going to talk about Hamas trying to start a third Intifada and potentially leading to the final war. That's really what's significant about this whole entire thing is, there's all these different signs of the times and they're important, but when things really deteriorate in Israel and Israel gets invaded, I think that's when we can know that we're pretty darn close. That's the end of the game at that point. Game over once we get there. And there's a lot of things that seem to be leading to that point. So this is on Israel 365. On Passover, a Temple Mount convention aims to show prophecy in action. All right, so what's this about? The Temple Mount 23, let me see if I can zoom in. It's kind of weird when I try and zoom in on this website. The Temple Mount 23 Jerusalem Convention. Okay, that's the name of the event. Temple Mount 23 Jerusalem Convention will be held on Passover bringing together Jews and Christians in the hopes of bringing the world closer to a, quote, house of prayer for all nations, end quote. Of course, that's referring to the temple, right? The effort to build the temple. The event will be hosted by the organization Cry for Zion on April 9th at the Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. So let's take a look at our Hebrew calendar. The 9th is going to be the fourth day of Passover, the fourth day of Pesach. Interestingly, that's going to be a week after General Conference, and and it'll be Easter. That's going to be Easter Day that they do this. Okay, so I'm gonna skip down. You get the idea. But there's a few things I wanted to read from here. Let's see. This is Anderson, whoever that is. Quote, as a Christian, I know Jesus had a powerful zeal for the temple. I want the Christian world to discover the same passion for what makes this place the holiest in the world and what that means for the church. My Jewish friends naturally have a native understanding of the Hebrew prophets and the biblical vision of Zion that uh, I'm also excited to explore together. Together, we can address the challenges in real discrimination facing the Jewish people today on the Mount of Jerusalem. Uh, we can also look back in gratitude for the important steps for freedom that have been made. End quote. Anderson noted that there is a gradual awakening in the Christian world to the Temple Mount. I've noticed that too. It seems like over the last few years, especially, but look at this. In 2013, 180,000 Christian visitors ascended the Temple Mount. By 2018, the first year of President Nelson's presidency, this increased to 670,000. Yeah, that is a pretty dramatic increase because at that point now you're over 500,000. You go from 18 to 67, 180,000 to 670,000. That's a big increase. And I feel like that's even more that points to President Nelson and his time as president of the church. I feel like there's so many times on this channel that we've come across like different things that happen in that year, either 2017 or 2018. But there was a lot of like activity, it seems, in those years. Quote, this is Anderson still. Christians are beginning to understand that if Israel is still special to God and Jerusalem is special, then how much more so is Zion, God's holy mountain at the heart of Jerusalem. So this is interesting because we've talked about how watching the Jews and how they're looking at all the signs of the times and they're expecting Messiah to come anytime. How that's important because it's a sign that the Lord is working with them in their own understanding, right? Well, it's reasonable to assume that he'd probably be working with other groups, and it does seem like he's working with the Christian world at large, especially us, and then also evangelicals. It's usually the evangelicals that are really into the second coming, the signs of the times, and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's interesting that that is happening with both Jews and Christians at a time when President Nelson becomes president of the church, and all these things are happening in the church, and we're seeing all these signs. It's all just like coming together, because again, it's not just going to be the Jews that convert to the church once Christ comes. It's going to be a lot of Christians too. So they're probably being prepared, and they're starting to, in a sense, see and appreciate the importance of temples, even though it's not the same type of temple that we currently go to. Um, they're realizing the importance of having a temple And when Christ comes, and if for any of them that do accept his church, the true church, then they're probably going to be blown away. They'll already have been prepped in thinking about the temple in Jerusalem, in a sense. Okay, so Anderson, he noted that the first Temple Mount Jerusalem Convention was held in 2018. You see that? This convention that's centered around getting a temple on the Temple Mount. It was held in 2018. For goodness sake, of all years. He noted that the first Temple Mount Jerusalem Convention was held in 2018 and was focused on dispelling the hoax that the Jewish temples did not stand on the Temple Mount. The belief that the temple stood in what is now the city of David contradicts all archaeological evidence and the sources in the Bible, but it is persistent nonetheless. That's just referring to the theory, and there's people, I know that there's some of you that that believe this. So let's see, city of David. Let's take a look at the map. We've talked about this a number of times. I myself used to favor this theory that the temple originally stood here in the city of David. This is the original Jerusalem right here. It was small. It was tiny. And this is, in fact, where we have the Temple of Melchizedek. Go back a couple weeks. I've done a couple videos on the Temple of Melchizedek, and according to archaeology, they do believe that it is the actual Temple of Melchizedek. But I've since changed my view. I don't think that it was down here where the first and second temples were. But anyway, the article is just saying that they're trying to debunk this idea that the temple would have been down here in the city of David, and that it was actually up here on the Temple Mount. That's all that's saying. Okay, so that's what they were doing and talking about in 2018. Quote, the first TMJC, so it's that conference. The first conference was an unprecedented meeting between Bible-believing Jews and Christians who could unite on the biblical heart for the Temple Mount and the Jewish people's need for freedom in that place. I can honestly say it opened a new chapter for many people in Jewish-Christian relations. It also coincided with the whole new Temple Mount awareness among Christians around the world. Let's see, I'm going to skip that part. And then he continues, the first convention was focused on debate, archaeology, and dispelling myths. This year, we are so excited to explore our shared passion for the holiest place in the world and the biblical vision for it. That's why we will also feature younger, passionate speakers and people who are creative film producers and music artists at TMJC 23. Yair Levy, a top Israeli music artist, will be playing live at the event. And by the way, one of my very first videos that I did for this channel was about this guy, Yair Levy. He has a channel. He is a Levite, okay? And so if you remember, the temple was basically run by the priests, which were the sons of Aaron. They're called the Kohanim. And then you have the Leviim, which are the Levites. They had different functions in the temple, one of which was to provide music at the temple. And the video that I did was on this guy, Yair Levy, and he was, according to Israel 365, he was the first Levite to sing on the Temple Mount in 2,000 years. As far as anybody knows, anyway. So I did a video about that. That by itself seemed to be a sign of the times. He wasn't really supposed to, but he was able to get away with it. I'm sure you can find the video on here somewhere on his channel. Oh, it's right here. Levite sing psalms on the Temple Mount. It's this one right here. And then he also did another video where he went and verified the name Jehovah on the east side of the Temple Mount, being spelled out by vines in Hebrew. So I'll post both those videos in the description below. He's kind of a, I don't know, he's kind of a like a Temple Mount activist, and he puts out good content. And as you can see, he's, all about music. I think he anticipates um, performing music in the temple once it's constructed. All right. So anyway, this convention's going to have him. Um, quote, Yair is a Jewish Levite who dreams of performing the Psalms on the Temple Mount itself. Anderson explained. Okay, the goal, of course, to bring about the prophetic vision of the quote-unquote house of prayer for all nations, as it reads in Isaiah 56:7. For those who cannot attend in person, the event can be viewed live online or by play on demand. I looked to see if there was I looked to see if there was a channel on YouTube, although I didn't search. Let me search for Cry for Zion. I don't know if this is. I don't know if this is their official website, but they did have the events website. I might check this out myself. All Nations. That's a really cool background. Anyway, I'll leave this for you. Hey, there's Adam. This is the guy that I interviewed right here, Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. Cool. So I'm going to try and watch this, I think. It's going to be on April 9th, so it's going to be during Easter. And this is Jerusalem time, so I'm not sure what time that'll be here. But anyway, hopefully they'll put it on YouTube or something like that, or there'll be an easy way to watch it. Okay. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so that's one thing that's happening right now. Keep in mind, now we're going to be moving on to how this is like a really intense time. Tensions are flaring. People are getting upset. There's a lot of provocative behavior on both sides as they're going to be doing this during Passover, which will also be during Ramadan at the Temple Mount. Okay, so let's talk about Ramadan. Israeli government to bar Jews from the Temple Mount on the last 10 days of Ramadan. Now, I've looked into this. Okay, so here's the calendar. This is like a Islamic, it's like similar to the hebcal.com site that I use all the time to convert between our calendar and the Hebrew calendar. Well, there's a similar one here. This is islamicfinder.org, where you can see Islamic holy days and months and stuff like that. And today is the 17th of March when I'm recording this. Happy St. Patrick's Day, I guess. A little less than a week from now, Ramadan is going to begin on Thursday, the 23rd. Ramadan is the name of that month. Okay. Let's switch over to what it looks like on the Islamic calendar called the Hijri calendar. So this is it right here. It goes from the 23rd of March until the 20th of April this year. And it's the Islamic year 1444. Which it's an interesting date, because you got all those fours for any of you people that are into the, like double number type thing. Okay, I'm going to. Oh yeah, okay. This is what I did. I looked at special Islamic days, and the next one that's coming up is going to be during Ramadan, and it's this one right here, Laylat al-Qadr or Qadr. I'm not sure. You click on that. Now, this might be a day to look to. It seems to be a really important day. It says, what is Laylat al-Qadr 2023? Or when is it? As we all know, the Laylat al-Qadr is one of the odd nights of the last 10 days of Ramadan. Okay. I'm not going to go into this like really too in depth, but it'd probably be worth noting this particular day. So it's during that last 10-day period that was just mentioned in the article. What is it? It's an Arabic is an Arabic word. Okay. Laylat al-Qadr is an Arabic word, not world, which means night of power, night of decree in English. It is also known as Laylat al-Qadr, Laylatul Qadr, Laylatul Qadr, okay, in different parts of the world. Ramadan is the holiest month for all Muslims around the world, and Laylat al-Qadr is the holiest night of Ramadan, which signifies the importance of this night. As mentioned in the beginning, this night is better than 1,000 months, and worshiping on this night is better than 83 years of worship. So I haven't done enough diving into it to know for sure, but it sounds like this is the holiest day of their year. This is like their um, Yom Kippur, so to speak, in Islam. I think if you know more about Islam, and if that's not right, then put it in the comments below. But to me, it sounds like this is their holiest night of the year. It takes place during the month of Ramadan, during the last 10 days. All right, as mentioned in the beginning, this night is better. Okay, this reason alone should encourage a true Muslim to spend this night in prayer, dua and dhikr, seeking forgiveness and asking Allah for all the blessings this world and hereafter. This night is so valuable that the Quran dedicates a special surah to it. I'm guessing that's like a well, I don't know. I don't know what a surah is. Maybe that's like a chapter. I don't know. Um, so, for example, this is from the Quran. Search for the night of Qadr in the odd nights of the last 10 days of Ramadan. Here's another thing from the Quran. Verily, we have sent it, this Quran, down. So the Quran, I guess the Quran came down on this night, according to their tradition. Verily, we sent it down in the night of Al-Qadr. And then later on, here's another one. Indeed, we sent it down during a blessed night. And then here's another one. Ramadan is the month in which was sent down the Quran as a guide to mankind, also clear signs for guidance and judgment between right and wrong. And then here's another part in the Quran. The night of Al-Qadr is better than 1,000 months. Whoever established prayers on the night of Qadr out of sincere faith and hoping for a reward from Allah, then all his previous sins will be forgiven. Okay, so it's a really important night, and it goes on. There's more. I'm not going to read it all, but I'll put this in the description if you want to learn more about it. So, okay, so let's get into this. The Israeli government has decided to place restrictions on visitation to the Temple Mount by non-Muslims during the Muslim month of Ramadan. Israeli Khan News reported on Sunday, including during the Jewish holiday of Passover. The hours of visitation by non-Muslims will be limited to 4 hours in the morning, Sunday through Thursday, and non-Muslims will be entirely barred from the site on the last 10 days of Ramadan. So, we just read about that. Part of that, I guess, has to do with Al-Qadr. And it's interesting because in Judaism, their holiest day is Yom Kippur, and that's also associated with 10 days, the 10 days of awe. So you have Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year, and the day itself is a holy day, and then it goes from there. It goes 10 days leading up to Yom Kippur, and those are the 10 days of awe. So it's interesting that there's kind of like a parallel there. Jews will also be prohibited from bringing food or drink to the site, as the Muslims will be fasting from sunrise until sundown during Ramadan. Just a quick story. When I was in the Army, my last company commander she was a female, and she was black, and she was a Muslim. And we were doing these inventories out at the motor pool. The motor pool is where you have tanks and trucks, and then you also have shipping containers that have a bunch of your unit's equipment. And so we had to go out there, inventories were going on, and it was hot. And I didn't know on that day that she was a Muslim, but she like went over into the shade like when there was a moment, and she was just like not looking very good. And I was like, "Ma'am, are you okay? Or, like, are you?" And then it came out that she was observing Ramadan during that time, and but it was like really bad. And I think that she did go ahead and get some water, because I think you're allowed to do that if you like really need it. And so, in fact, I think I ended up going to the Express, which is the gas station on post, and then grabbing her a thing of water, if my memory serves me correctly. Anyway, okay, this has been government policy every year, and while other authorities claim it is due to the threat of Arab violence at the site, violence on the Temple Mount has nonetheless intensified every year during Ramadan. So I guess this policy isn't really working. I guess it'd be interesting to contrast, okay, would there be more violence with or without these restrictions? Who knows? I guess we can't really know. This year, Ramadan begins on the evening of Wednesday, March 22nd, and ends on Thursday, April 20th. The last Friday of Ramadan, called Alvida Juma, or Friday of Farewell, is considered one of the holiest days on the Muslim calendar. In 1979, this Muslim holiday was usurped by the Iranian regime in 1979, which renamed it Quds Day, dedicating it to hatred of Israel and Zionism. It is not celebrated by any other Muslims outside of Israel and Iran. So that's interesting, because in Israel, I guess the Palestinians and the Arab Israelis um, go by that name instead. Well, they probably go by both, Alvida Juma, but also the Iranian invention of Quds Day. So just Iran, and then the Muslims inside Israel. In 2017, over 300,000 Arabs arrived at the Temple Mount to observe Quds Day. Another interesting date, because we're talking about 2017, the year before President Nelson became prophet, and the year that all those crazy things happened. The eclipse, Oumuamua, Trump, his first year in office, the Revelation 12 sign, and on and on and on and on. We are in that time, you guys. In addition, this year, Passover runs from the evening of April 5th to the evening of Thursday, April 13th. Last year, Arab rioting intensified on and before Passover, leading to the arrest of over 300 Arabs in one in one day on the eve of the Jewish holiday. In years when Passover did not coincide with Ramadan, Muslims scattered bread, referred to as chametz, in forbidden to Jews on Passover, on the pathways. We've talked about that a little bit, because remember, during Passover, or during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is this entire period of time right here. So you see this on the calendar from the 6th to the 13th. From what I've seen some videos where they actually remove it completely from their house. Anything that has leaven, you're supposed to get rid of it. And of course, you don't consume it. But it looks like they're going the extra mile on the Temple Mount by discouraging Jews from going up there by placing bread, leavened bread up there. So that's not good. So yeah, Passover and Ramadan do not always coincide, but from what I've read, whenever they do, things get particularly intense, and that's going to be the case this year, as it was in last year. Is that what it said, or 2021? No, last. Let's see. I don't know. I already forgot, but I'm pretty sure it was last year, because I remember talking about this last year. Last year, there was like some Muslims that had come up with a calculation where they believed prophetically that Israel would cease to be a state by like June or July of last year. So I was worried that people were taking this seriously, but no, I mean, nothing. They're still around. Okay. Let's move on further. These restrictions on Jews will only serve to turn the Temple Mount compound into a base for Arab violence and terrorism, the destruction of antiquities, and harm to police, as it does every year. Nisani told Israel 365 News. And then he continues. This has never decreased the Arab violence and will certainly not help anything. The full responsibility for this surrender to terrorism will be in the hands of ministers of government and the cabinet. End quote. Rabbi Yehuda Levi, co-founder of High on the Har and director of outreach for Yeshivat Har Habayit, was dismayed at the report of possible restrictions. Quote, it's unfortunate that a Jewish government can't figure out a way to allow Jews and Muslims to coexist religiously during the Muslim holidays. The policy showcases that the priorities of the Muslim holiday take precedence over the Jewish significance of the site. So, yeah, so obviously Jews don't like that. You know, that's a time when many of them will want to go up. Not all though, because there are some that don't think that they should go up there because there's different theories as to where the temple actually was on the Temple Mount. You know, there's kind of like a prevailing theory that it would be right where the Dome of the Rock is, but there are other theories, and because of the uncertainty, and because you're not supposed to go in places like the Holy of Holies, the sanctuary, in places that only priests could go, that you just shouldn't go up there at all, because you don't want to defile the site and yourself by doing that. Okay, last year, over 780 Arabs were arrested on the Temple Mount for violent activities during Ramadan. And I covered that on the channel. And it was crazy because Israeli police actually went into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. A lot of people think that the Dome of the Rock is because like this is supposed to be the third holiest site in Islam here in Jerusalem, and a lot of people think that it's the Dome of the Rock, but it's not. It's actually Al-Aqsa Mosque right here. And so there was a big uproar when Israeli police raided the mosque and went inside and arrested people inside the mosque. I can't remember because it's been a year now, but I think that may have been unprecedented. It's never happened before. I'd have to refresh my memory, but I think there was something like that. Okay, so that was last year. So in 2021, the Temple Mount was closed to Jews for 19 days during the Muslim month of fasting. This was met with massive riots at the temple site, or at the site, accompanied by riots in Arab Jewish cities and over 3,400 rockets from Gaza. As the Arabs rioted on the Temple Mount, they also worked to create physical barriers to prevent Jews from visiting their holiest site. The barriers were created using stones that were that were remnants of the Jewish temples, damaging the stones in the process. Rioters barricaded themselves in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They also threw rocks and launched fireworks at the Western Wall from the Temple Mount. In other occasions, the Arabs took advantage of the absence of Jews to carry out illegal excavations that potentially destroyed artifacts at the site. And that would be very unfortunate if you had special things from the first and second temples and stuff like that. And in order to cover that up so that there's no proof that there was a Jewish temple there, if they had destroyed it, those artifacts. So anyway, as you can see here, here's the Western Wall. So it sounds like part of what they were doing is that they were throwing rocks and stuff over the this like wall up here down to where the Jews go to the Western Wall. And then I remember they had actually really stockpiled just like a ton of rocks and stuff over here, just right by the mosque, to throw at police and stuff like that. It was a crazy situation, and I fear that the same thing's going to happen this year, if not worse, because things seem to be worse this year. If you're, a Palestinian and you're looking at the Israeli government and them wanting to consolidate power, that's like a direct threat toward you, because that's why it seems like that's why they want to consolidate power. They want to be able to take more land away from you, maybe evict you, maybe change the status quo on the Temple Mount, which would send everybody into a rage. So this year in particular may be a really bad year because of that, on top of other things. Um, okay, now let's talk about Hamas. Okay, Hamas Ramadan plan. Now, this is a little bit scary. They have a plan for Ramadan, and it has to do with an intifada. So, this first part of the article, it just talks about how there's been recent raids on different like terrorist groups and cells and arrests made and stuff like that. And then it says the terrorist organizations have vowed revenge for the Israeli operations, but will attempt to carry out attacks against Israelis regardless. And the Palestinian Authority will not interfere. The Palestinian Authority is basically the, de facto government of the West Bank. And then if I'm not mistaken, Hamas is in control of the Gaza Strip. Let's see, Hamas, Wikipedia. Let me just double check. And became the de facto governing authority of the Gaza Strip. Yeah, following the 2007 Battle of Gaza. If you don't know what that's talking about, if you're not familiar with Israel, I always like repeat things because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. I don't want to just assume that everybody knows what I'm talking about. So the West Bank is like the larger piece of land that Palestinians want for their country and their state, right? And it's governed by the Palestinian Authority, or the PA. And then over here to the west and along the Mediterranean coast, you have this little strip of land right here called the Gaza Strip, and Hamas is currently in charge of that. Okay, so Hamas, Palestinian Authority, and then up here you have the Golan Heights, and I'm not too familiar with what's going on up there, but I'd assume that the Palestinian Authority is probably in charge up there too. I don't know, or the Israelis themselves. Um, okay, so since the last IDF, that's the Israeli military, since the last IDF operation in Gaza in May 2021, terrorist cells began forming in northern Samaria, unmolested by the Palestinian Authority, which still refuses to fight against them. So the Palestinian Authority has allowed groups to form and strengthen, I guess, in their territory. The terrorist organizations plan to set up attacks toward the month of Ramadan as a catalyst for a third intifada. Okay, this is where things get a little bit scary if they succeed. Okay, what is an intifada? Well, I'll tell you. An intifada is a rebellion or uprising or a resistance movement. It is a key concept in contemporary Arabic usage referring to the legitimate uprising against oppression. It means tremor, shivering, shuddering. And I always thought that it only had to do with Israel, but I guess that's not true. The first one, I guess, in modern times was in Iraq, okay, by socialist and communist forces against the Hashemite monarchy. And then it has a list of different intifadas, in different places. Here's one against British colonial presence in Bahrain in 1965, and da 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 da. Well, we're focused in on Israel, so let's talk about intifadas in Israel. There was the first one. It was from December 1987 to September 1993. It was motivated by collective Palestinian frustration over Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as it approached a 20-year mark, having begun after Israel's victory in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Yeah, you see that? 1967, 1987, 20 years. It's like a 20-year anniversary. They're upset, and so Intifada. Okay, so 87 to 93. And then this was more like in my time, because I was like in high school at the time, and I remember this. There was the second Intifada. Okay. This was from September 2000 until February 2005. So that was like well into my mission when I was in Spain. The second Intifada, also known as Al-Aqsa Intifada, Al-Aqsa referring to the mosque, was a major Palestinian uprising against Israel. The general triggers for the unrest are speculated to have been centered around the failure of the 2000 Camp David summit, which was expected to reach a final agreement on the Israeli-Palestinian peace process by July 2000. Outbreaks of violence began in September 2000 after Ariel Sharon, okay, then the Israeli opposition leader, made a provocative visit to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The visit itself was peaceful, but as anticipated, sparked protests and riots that the Israeli police put down with rubber bullets and tear gas. You get that? So they were upset at what happened, the failure of the Camp David summit, and then the opposition leader, so like the opposition, the one that would be trying to become the next prime minister, Ariel Sharon, and he was for a time. He visited the Temple Mount, so that was like I guess they viewed it as like a slap in the face. Let's see, he served as the 11th prime minister of Israel from March 2001 until April 2006. So that's interesting. So at the time that he went up there, he was just like the opposition candidate, I guess, and then he actually won and became the prime minister after that. Okay, so keep this in mind, that because who knows if this still would have happened if he hadn't gone up to the Temple Mount. If he had not gone up to the Temple Mount, maybe there wouldn't have been a second Intifada. Keep that in mind, because a very, very similar thing just happened this year. We've talked about this guy on the channel a couple of times. His name is Ben Gvir. He is a very passionate person, very controversial, and very, 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 very pro-Israeli and against the Palestinians, essentially. So much so that he's almost kind of like a caricature of like the very, very, very far right. And he was turned into, if I remember right, the head of the national police in Israel. I could be a little bit off with the details there, but could you imagine some like very inflammatory figure in the United States? Just pick whoever, someone very, very, you know, it's like if you were to pick someone like, what's that guy's name? What's that guy's name that does all the documentaries? More liberal documentarian? Oh yeah, Michael Moore. So imagine like him, for example, if you, and I'm not trying to turn this into a political thing, but if you took someone like this or some other, from whatever side of the political spectrum, it doesn't matter. If you pick someone like this that was just like a raging whatever they are, and then you put them over something that the others would hate to see them as, that's what happened. So look at this. And this was in January. So this is just 2 months ago. The United Nations Security Council set an emergency meeting for Thursday to discuss far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, his visit to Jerusalem's Flashpoint Temple Mount, as the Palestinian mission to the UN urged members of the council to use the opportunity to act against Israel in order to avert a quote-unquote religious war. All this because he went up to the Temple Mount. And I would not be surprised, my experience learning about him, that he was maybe trying to have a third Intifada. For him, that would be a great honor. I'm not even kidding you. What I know about him, I'm pretty sure that he knew exactly what he was doing, and he was hoping for a third Intifada. However, Ben-Gvir's Tuesday visit to the Temple Mount struck a nerve in Washington, and the Security Council diplomats speculated that the Biden administration might be swayed to sign off on what is perceived as a balanced statement in favor of maintaining the so-called status quo at the Jerusalem holy site. The unwritten policy governing the compound allows Muslims to pray and enter with few restrictions, while Jews can visit only during limited time slots via a single gate and walk on a predetermined route closely accompanied by police and cannot openly pray. Ben-Gvir's visit Tuesday, held on the 10th of Tevet, a Jewish fast day, mourning the events that led to the destruction of the first temple, was his first trip to the holy site since taking up his ministerial post last week. Ben-Gvir is the head of the far-right Otzma Yehudit party, a part of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling coalition. So he chose to go on a day that's significant to the destruction of the first temple. This was like a symbolic time to go up to the Temple Mount as you're thinking about what was once there, in the very beginning. But critics have argued that Ben-Gvir is no ordinary minister. I don't think there's any arguing that. There's no need to argue. It's pretty clear. Given his history as a provocateur and his long-standing ties to Jewish extremists. Ben-Gvir himself also admitted in a Tuesday interview that police have allowed Jewish prayer to quietly take place on the site for years in violation of the status quo. He refused to say after his Tuesday visit whether he would push for changing the status quo at the site to enable Jewish prayer. See, and this is a possibility with what they're trying to do with the government. If they're able to consolidate power, who knows what kind of things they might do, but maybe they would lift that restriction and be like, sorry, we're going to allow it. Ben-Gvir's ministry oversees the police force. Yep. See, it's like if you took if you ever watched The Office, it was a great series. There was some bad stuff in it, but overall, it was a good comedy series, a sitcom. But if you know Dwight Schrute, he's basically the Dwight Schrute of Israel, and he's been put over. And he was put over the police. In a video clip taken during his early morning visit, Ben-Gvir decried what he called racist discrimination, quote unquote, against Jewish worshippers at the site and said the visits would continue. Quote, the Israeli government won't surrender to a murderous organization, to a vile terrorist organization, end quote, said Ben-Gvir in response to threats from Hamas and other terror groups, which have warned of repercussions if the tour went ahead. On Wednesday, Palestinian UN envoy Mansour penned a letter to Japan, which holds the presidency of the Security Council for the months of January, in which he blasted Ben-Gvir's quote-unquote storming, I mean that's a little dramatic, storming of the Al-Aqsa mosque courtyards. Quote, the Security Council must condemn and demand an immediate halt to all aggression by Israel, the occupying power, against the Palestinian people and their holy sites, especially in Jerusalem. He called Ben-Gvir's visit, quote, breach of international law, which absolutely prohibits the occupying power from altering the character, status, and demography of the occupied territory. Only such urgent, serious action can avert the violent expulsion and religious war that the Israeli government and its hateful racist extremists are threatening to provoke, Mansour wrote. Okay, now look at this. This is the thing right here. A visit by then opposition leader Ariel Sharon in September 2000, we just talked about that, was followed by significant Palestinian riots and clashes that became the second Palestinian Intifada. Clashes between Israeli security forces and Palestinian rioters seeking to prevent Jews from entering the site fueled an 11-day war with Hamas in 2021. So this was a very very similar situation to what happened in the year 2000 with Ariel Sharon. And I would argue that they probably are more upset and against Ben Gvir going up than Ariel Sharon. Okay, and then I just talked about in 2021 the 11-day war with Hamas. Um, and this is his attitude toward it right here. Um, so, National Security Minister Ben Gvir vowed to continue visiting the Flashpoint holy site regardless. Quote, I manage my own policy concerning the Temple Mount, not that of the Jordanian government. With all due respect to Jordan, Israel is an independent country. I went up to the Temple Mount. I will continue to go up to the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is the most important place to the Jewish people, and the state of Israel is a sovereign state, an independent state, not under the auspices of any other country. So he just like flat out ignores basically, in a way, that Jordan is supposed to be like the custodian of the site under the Jordanian Waqf organization or whatever it is. And he's like, no, I'm just going to go there anyway. This is our country. And I'm going to keep going up. um, oh, man. So this was January 3rd that he went up there. I should probably put that on the timeline because this may be something that is still playing out right now. This website, jewishexponent.com, also talks about this. They added another bit of information about it. When he did this, well, it says here, okay, let me just read it. A visit to the Temple Mount by then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon in 2000 triggered riots that became the Second Intifada. And Ben Gvir's eagerness to visit during periods of unease has fueled criticism of him as a pyromaniac, or well, that's supposed to be pyromaniac, in Israeli-Palestinian tensions. Yair Lapid, which was the last prime minister before Netanyahu, had urged Ben Gvir and others not to visit the Temple Mount, saying, quote unquote, people will die if Ben Gvir provoked violence there. Afterward, the Foreign Ministry of Jordan, which sees itself as a caretaker of the mosque, issued a statement that condemned the visit in this quote, in the strongest terms. The Palestinian Authority called it in quote unquote unprecedented provocation. Sorry, forgot how to talk for a minute there. Okay, so getting back to Hamas and their plans for Ramadan, think about what Ben Gvir just did a couple months ago. Think about what's going on with the Israeli government right now, how there's strife, there's division, there's even talk about civil war. This is a great time if you're on the other side, to maybe make a move. The terrorist organizations plan to step up attacks toward the month of Ramadan as a catalyst for a third intifada. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh published a statement on February 23rd in which he said the Palestinian people will not allow anyone to suppress the intifada that was developing in the West Bank, and added that, quote, the campaign against the enemy is entering a stage of strong desperation of Israel and breaking the occupiers and expelling them from the land of our fathers and grandfathers, end quote. Hamas aims to bring about a major escalation during Ramadan. Developments on the ground are working in its favor. The Palestinian Authority's power is in continuous decline. So the Palestinian Authority generally is the more, I guess, legitimate, the more stabilizing force between them and Hamas. Hamas is classified as a terrorist organization. So the Palestinian the Palestinian Authority's power is in continuous decline, while in Israel, the new government is in a state of diplomatic confrontation with the international community and in a domestic political crisis. You see what it's saying there? The Palestinian Authority is in decline. The Israeli government is in a state of kind of like chaos and division. They're fighting themselves as well as the international community. It's like saying this is a time when the police aren't really around. They're distracted with other things. And I don't mean to simplify the situation. I probably don't understand it fully, but this is just my understanding of what is happening. The younger Palestinian generation is discouraged by the corrupt Palestinian Authority and have no memories of previous intifadas, thirst for confrontation against Israel. The system of Palestinian incitement takes advantage of this, and the social networks encourage the young to initiate terror attacks and become TikTok heroes. While other social media platforms limit or censor Palestinian incitement, TikTok, a Chinese company, does not. Okay, so you have a whole group of youth that were not around, they were not born yet for the second Intifada. So now maybe it's their turn. That's the way some of them are thinking. That's a multiplier to this whole thing. The IDF will be forced to launch additional operations deep in Palestinian territory because the Palestinian Authority no longer fights against terrorism in violation of the Oslo Accords. Most of the Palestinian public in the West Bank is not interested in a new Intifada. An estimated 160,000 Palestinians work in Israel, and they want to continue supporting their families. However, the increasing violence may dictate events. Ramadan, Hamas's plan. The violence so far has not developed into a full-scale intifada for several reasons. One, the internal division between Fatah and Hamas. Number two, the Palestinian Authority refuses to sponsor the terrorist activities of the armed groups. Number three, most of the Palestinian public in the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem does not participate in violence. The Palestinian incitement machine is taking advantage of the fact that Passover overlaps with Ramadan this year. Groups on the Israeli right are planning activities on the Temple Mount and at the Western Wall during the holiday. And we just read about that conference that they're going to have. The Palestinians will broadcast their false narrative that Israel intends to take over the Temple Mount and the Al-Aqsa Mosque and divide them physically between Jews and Muslims, as it did at the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron in 1994. The Palestinian narrative will point to increasing numbers of Jewish visitors to the Temple Mount. Last year, 3,670 Jews visited the Mount during Passover, a figure which is expected to increase this year. Some zealous Jews may even proclaim their intention to restore the millennium-old Paschal sacrifice this year. And I remember last year they were offering a reward for anyone that successfully went up to the Temple Mount and performed a sacrifice. Any Israeli attempt to change the status quo on the Temple Mount is, from the point of view of Muslims, the crossing of a red line. Hamas has been planning for a long time to ignite a new intifada in eastern Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, using two main elements that can arouse the Palestinian street: the security prisoners in Israeli prisons, and Al-Aqsa Mosque. The security prisoners have already announced their intent to initiate a hunger strike at the beginning of Ramadan. The action plan of Hamas and PIJ for Ramadan is as follows. 1. Proclamation of civil disobedience in the Arab neighborhoods in eastern Jerusalem. 2. Launch a war of attrition against IDF forces and Israeli civilians out of Nablus and Jenin. Where is that? I think those are West Bank cities. I know that Nablus is. Let's see. Nablus. Nablus is right there. Okay, where's Jenin? Yeah, I was right. They're two Palestinian cities in the northern part of the West Bank. Okay. So launch a war of attrition from there, based out of there. Launch rockets from Gaza to support the new Intifada. Number 4, call for lone wolf terrorists to launch attacks against Israeli soldiers and civilians everywhere. And number 5, call on Israeli Arabs to disrupt the fabric of life in Israel. Estimates on the Palestinian street are that it will be possible to talk about a new Intifada in the West Bank within a few weeks. As Palestinians' death increase, the number of those joining the new Intifada will increase. So, there you have it. We are in interesting times. It basically all centers around this right here for the most part. Not completely, but mostly. And it seems like, a type of perfect storm is brewing right now. And we only have a couple weeks to go. Let's pray that it doesn't happen. We don't want violence. We don't want people to die. We don't want suffering. At the same time, if it does happen and if it does escalate, then that just means that we're that much closer to Christ coming to resolve everything and fixing this entire situation, both here and around the entire world. All right, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share the Book of Mormon and let me know when you do so I can add your numbers to the tracker. You can do it anonymously if you'd like. Just let me know. Leave very short, simple messages so I can easily find when you share the Book of Mormon, so I don't have to go through an entire paragraph or story or something like that. Just save that for a separate post. And I'll talk to you guys later.